Put your hands together for Cheryl Yeoh!
So, first of all, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks you all for coming.
Awesome. And I usually start with a very, very deep existential question. Those who came to previous events know, but I just decided to change a little bit. So have you watched Star Wars?
Yes.
What's
Depends which one, the old one or the new one.
You didn't watch all the Star Wars?
No, I'm not really a Star Wars fan.
Okay. She's not
Okay, I
geeky enough.
prefer Star Wars to Star Trek, though.
Okay, I haven't watched Star Trek.
See?
Okay, I'm not geeky enough. So, what's your favorite character?
In Star Wars?
Yeah.
Shit. I told you I don't watch it. Okay, ask me about X-Men.
X-Men. Okay, what's your favorite X-Men
Wolverine.
character? Who?
Wolverine.
Wolverine, okay. Just because of Hugh Jackson, right?
No, you know, at one time, they used to call me Wolverine as a nickname. This is like way back in high school. There's a reason for that.
Don't mess up with this girl.
I was not a Wolverine an X-Men person, but I don't know, somehow I think in one of the old movies, there was this scene where Wolverine was in a car and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and something happened, they brake, and he crashed out of the windscreen but he's strong, right, and he didn't die. So I think there was one time, this is in Malaysia before I went to the US, and I was really bad with seatbelts. Don't do this at home, kids.
Okay.
And so my friend called me Wolverine because of that.
You were really bad with seatbelts.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not anymore.
Okay. So can you guys listen very loud and clear? Awesome. Okay, now we had a little bit of an icebreaker, Wolverine. I want to ask you, besides being Wolverine, who are you?
Who am I? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a daughter. I don't know.
So how do you define being an entrepreneur?
So I think by definition, entrepreneurs bring something new into the world. They build things, they create things, they solve problems. So you have to have that perspective of what is it in the world that you want to make better, and you just do it.
So tell me a little bit of your childhood and what stories you have that made you come to the realization that you are an entrepreneur.
Oh, I have plenty of entrepreneurial stories. I think some people always ask, are entrepreneurs born or are they taught, right? And I was one of those, and I believe that you can be taught how to be an entrepreneur, and you can be born an entrepreneur. I actually always believe that I was born an entrepreneur because I started coming up with business ventures when I was very little in Standard 2, I think when I was like 7 or 8 years old. That was my first business venture, and then I've always had odd jobs. So it doesn't have to be where I start a company or business, but I was always thinking of ways to make money, I guess, and make things better. And I always had that entrepreneurial spirit, and my mom encouraged that. So in Asia, in Malaysia, usually moms say, study, right? Don't work, or don't think so much about business. But I was always kind of doing odd jobs, opening a flea market at the basement of MCOP Mall on Sunday nights, or Sunday. I did door-to-door marketing, selling Domino's card. Like you have those 30% off cards. You sell 10 for 30 ringgit. I sold a ton of that and made a lot of money. I did telemarketing with Nielsen, asking questions about McDonald's.
How old are you?
I don't know. I was working ever since I was pretty much in second grade, Standard 2. And then my mom was also a businesswoman, so she really inspired me, I guess. Like, I remember in school, they would always ask in the report card at the end of the year, what do you want to be, right? It was always businesswoman and then teacher and police. Because teacher and police is one of those standard answers, right? But because my mom was a businesswoman, I wanted to be like my mom. And she, one of the years, she had this catalog business, but she was shutting down that company, so she had a lot of inventory, and she's like, girl, what do you want to do with it? Do you want extra pocket money? Why don't you sell these things? So I'm like, sure. I think I was in Form 2 at the time, so I was 14 years old. So I got my junior, he was 13 years old, I gave him $200. Hey, why don't you come and be my coolie? Which means he would just be lifting all those things, the inventory. What we would do is we would go to these giant business buildings, like Glomac, which is like a business building, and they always have like the sign called no solicitations. You're not supposed to sell stuff to the businesses. But I was trying to get rid of my mom's inventory, and she had talking alarm clocks, car ionizer, filing systems, and all that. So I was supposed to get rid of it for her, and everything that I sell, I was able to keep the money, right? So I devised this way of like basically tricking the receptionist and saying that, oh, we're here to deliver these items to the 5th floor, to Mr. Takashi or whatever. And they would let us in, and then we would go door to door, basically knocking on businesses' door to like sell. So I sold everything that summer.
Wow. By the age of like, how old are you by then?
I was 14 at the time.
14. Very nice. So your mom was a big inspiration for your career.
Would drive me there, and she would wait for me until I'm done.
That's amazing. That's really great. And so your whole childhood you spent in Malaysia?
Yeah, pretty much. I actually never left the country until I got a scholarship. So I got a government scholarship to study engineering in the US after high school. And that was the first time I left the country.
So what did you study in the US?
I studied operations research and industrial engineering.
Okay.
I was actually in chemical engineering at first, and then I switched into operations research because that was more math and computer science, and I wanted to do something more businessy. Okay. And I realized that if I were to be a chemical engineer, I would come back and work for like a water treatment plant, or and that thought didn't really appeal to me. And the only reason why I picked chemical engineering was because I did really well in chemistry in high school.
And so how do you remember by the time, how did you make the decision to go to the US? Because I imagine you applied for the scholarship. So what inspired you to move from Malaysia in that time?
So actually my year was interesting. I graduated in the millennium year, 2000, and I actually was given a scholarship. The Prime Minister at the time called for the top, I think 100 or 200 kids in Malaysia with the best SPM score, and I was very lucky to be part of that group. And it was a big luncheon, and then we were the first people to walk across the KLCC Twin Towers, the bridge, and toured Putrajaya and everything.
Were you that geeky that stands like Hermione Granger that stands?
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. I'm that person, right? But at the luncheon, they say everybody here gets a scholarship to go anywhere they wanted to study, which I'm very lucky to be part of that. And so I got the pick, basically, US, UK, Germany, France, Japan, they had everything, right? And I picked to go to the US. And a lot of Malaysians usually go to London or UK. But I really, you know, and our system follows the British system, right? But I kind of got sick of it because it was a whole year of studying and then, or a whole year of playing, really. And then you study at the last 1 month, and then for that one exam that determines your whole year. Whereas the US system was a bit more kind of stressful because you always have homework and prelims and everything. But more so it was, to me, a more wholesome education, a more well-rounded education, because at the time I remember when I was evaluating where to go, the US, you know, excelled, you know, they emphasize sports, arts, creativity, blah, blah, blah. And to me, I've always been a jack of all trades, master of none. My dad has always called me that. I like to dabble in many different things. I'm a very curious kid and very resourceful. I just like to ask a lot of questions, you know. And the UK education system to me was very deep dive. If you want to be an expert in something, you want to do a PhD, and you're darn sure that that's your major, then yes, you go to the UK or Germany or whatnot. I just took the other approach.
Okay. So just for curiosity, you seem really aware of the decision you made and why. Were you conscious by that time of all these decisions, or do you go back and reflect nowadays on why you did this?
I always reflect. I think I always reflect. I recently, when I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, that was one of my...
Okay. And we just find that she climbed Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my most memorable experiences. It was really tough, 19,000 feet, you know.
Yeah.
and the third tallest mountain in the world. So I had a lot of time to read books, and I read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, the book. I would highly recommend that book to everyone. And that book talks about, you know, in a way, success, right? What makes successful people. And sometimes we tend to think that we are successful because of what we did and our hard work, and it's very, I mean, of course, it's a very American way, very individualistic way of thinking as well, that, oh, it's because of me. But reading that book made me realize that there's a series of events that happened throughout my life that got me to this point, whether it's good or bad, right? Whether it's my upbringing, my situation. So it gave me that new sense of appreciation for every single little thing that happened in my life that was actually bad, that made me stronger in who I am today. Because frankly, I didn't come from a very good childhood in terms of my family, and I'm very open about it because I think that has given me you know, the kind of hardship that has made me emotionally very strong. And I know how to set boundaries in terms of kind of, you know, putting that in a corner, and how can I conquer and not let it come out in different ways. Because I think a lot of people, when they are faced with setbacks, they tend to keep it inside, they don't talk about it, but it comes out and it manifests in many different ways in your work, in your relationships, your friendships, happiness, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the kind of person who, I am who you see. I don't hide, because that has helped me through many, many things. So anyway, coming back to the point, a lot of these, you know, reading that book really helped me understand that it was my hardship, my situation, especially in Malaysia, that made me who I was, and how I was able to succeed in the US. A lot of it came from that, you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So what do you think the US changed on you like the most? So how being a child from Malaysia that went to live in the US, how did that make you different from maybe friends or people who didn't go to the US?
Well, the US is an interesting place, right? It's definitely a melting pot of so many people from different countries. When I lived in New York City for 5 years, almost 5 years, literally it was one of the most diverse cities in the world, I think. And that made you appreciate your background and everything, and that you're not, and it gives you many, many different perspectives. And it puts you in the right place, right? In New York, it's kind of like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere in the world, because it's such a tough city.
I heard that before.
Yeah, it's definitely very highly strung, very competitive, but at the same time, there's just so many people from all walks of life, and you're not being judged for where you come from or who you are. You're being literally judged for how capable you are, right? So it kind of puts everyone at a level playing field. And so it gives you, it helps you remove some of your it makes you appreciate your unique background, but it makes you realize that, hey, if you work hard and you do the right things, you can succeed too. So that was a very refreshing feeling for me.
Which do you think is easy to bring that kind of feeling to a community in Malaysia?
I believe so, right? Yeah. I think one of the reasons I came back is because I began to see that happening here. Yeah. And in a way, you know, I think I'm really up for change. Mm-hmm. And so entrepreneurship is one of the ways where I think can level the playing field for a lot of people. Because in entrepreneurship, there's just no mentioning of, or shouldn't be any mentioning of age, race, religion, background. It doesn't matter if you've graduated from school, right? If you can build a successful company, you should be accepted, right?
Yeah, you gotta demonstrate results fast, and if you don't do it, it's very clear.
Correct. Yeah.
Amazing. So let's go a little bit back into your story. I was actually really surprised because I didn't know you had worked on management consulting before. I was actually stalking her before this interview. So tell me a little bit more, like, so you went to school. By the way, very funny fact, I just came from a conference in the Philippines, and I met so many different people. I met at least 5 people in such a conference, it's kind of a lot, who said, hey, I know Cheryl. We studied together. Like, everyone knows this girl.
What? Who?
I can't Bay, who does some hard.
Bay, yeah.
Yeah. And Earl. Earl.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I gotta check the business cards and let you know. But everyone knows. I said, shit, I cannot introduce anyone to her. So sad. But anyways.
You can't gossip about me.
Yeah. So basically, I'm gonna talk about that later. But you went to school, Cornell, and to college. And why did you join management consulting? First off.
Yeah, so I had always wanted to be a management consultant, but because I was a foreign student in the US, it was very hard, and I studied engineering. So because the word engineering and management is like on the opposite spectrum, right after college, I actually was not able to be a management consultant. I was very disappointed because of visa issues. They cannot approve my visa because of that. So my first job was actually a finance analyst in an engineering firm, a wastewater treatment firm, which is ironic because I got out of chemical engineering because I didn't want to go into wastewater treatment, but I did. So my first job was actually in Arizona. I also went there because I followed a boy. Bad idea. Don't ever follow a boy. See, the emotional part of me coming out, right? And then I went back to school. Cornell gave me another scholarship to do my master's in engineering management. So now the word management was in there. I was able to get a visa to do management consulting. So I actually jumped into management consulting after my my master's degree. And I always wanted to do that because, again, I was always a jack of all trades, master of none, and management consulting is exactly that, right? You're a generalist. You're meant to parachute into a company and within 3 days be an expert in the company in whatever industry or field it is, and you're supposed to help them, come up with a strategy or some sort of operational plan to turn around the company in like 3 to 6 months, and then that's basically it. And then 6 months later, you're gone. You're an expert in another company. So for me, it was a chance to see different companies, how different companies work. So the first company, my first assignment was Reader's Digest, and I was so happy because I grew up reading Reader's Digest. I'm sure many of you did. So it was interesting to see that experience, and I had to fire 200 people, unfortunately, because print was dying, right, and IT was taking over, and I had to fire 200 of the old IT people and outsource it to India. So it was kind of an interesting experience. Yeah, and then I consulted for Starwood and all that, so it was pretty interesting.
And what made you pivot into startups? And what, if I can include another question inside that one, you're not necessarily a tech profile. So what made you decide to jump into the tech startups world?
Yeah.
And once you defined it, okay, I'm gonna do that, what were the challenges of being a non-tech into startups?
So I got into management consulting in the wrong time. It really had the glamour with the hotel mileage and air flight points and everything, but I joined in 2008 and the market crashed in 2009, right? I mean, around that time, actually the same, around that whole 2 years. So all the projects that I had was outsourcing, cutting costs. It was all the asshole jobs I had to do. So the glamour was sort of, kind of not there anymore in New York City. And at the time, it was also when Y Combinator was getting really popular. Yeah, and then Facebook, Twitter was coming up. Dropbox, Airbnb was, gaining prominence. So at the same time, I was in New York City, and the financial industry was just so jaded, and people wanted to quit the finance industry. So there was a lot of buzz around, hey, look west, right? There's so many great companies being built. We are really smart people. Let's try to create a tech community in New York, and let's build companies. So there was a bit of that buzz going around, and then one of my school friends from Cornell, all of a sudden, he's like, guys, I'm quitting IBM. I'm moving to the Bay Area. I just got funding from a VC. And he was like, and we were like, oh, what's your idea? And he was like, oh, I can't tell you. It is a typical, that's why I see Malaysia right now kind of a little bit like New York, where people are not they're not willing to share ideas because they're afraid someone would steal it,
Yeah.
which is a stupid idea, by the way. You have to share your ideas. Nobody's going to steal your idea. And if they do, don't worry about it, because when they see another idea, you're going to steal someone else's idea anyway, right?
Yeah. And actually, if they steal your idea, you should congratulate them, because execution is actually...
Execution is everything, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, he was the first guy who went. I'm like, oh, what is this VC thing, right? And then like a few months later, he raised some round of funding. So I was like, oh, interesting. And then I was like, you know, I grew up being an entrepreneur, right? I always had companies and business ideas in high school. I joined the Young Enterprise program, and I had ran a one-year company in high school and all that. So every time I went out to events and I see someone giving me their business card and they say they founded this company, I felt like, hey, I should do that too. I want to found a company too, right? So finally, was really thinking hard about what problem I wanted to solve, and I wanted to solve something that was my problem, right? And I still believe to this day that you should build a company that where you are either, in a way, the user, so you know the pain points, or you have worked in an industry very long that you know what can be improved in the industry, what is inefficient about the industry. So at the time, daily deals was very popular, like Groupon, living social vouchers. I'm sure everybody here got caught up with that as well. But in the US, there was 600 companies. So I, you know, being Malaysian and being a bit cheap, bought a lot of deals, and I had like dozens of it in my bag, and I carried it all over. But I felt like it was a very archaic way. Hey, we're in the 21st century, why are we carrying these paper vouchers? And you know, it's so outdated. So I began thinking about a solution to solve my problem. And the way I went about it was, I think Ray Lau, he was the guy who got the VC funding. He really, in a way, was my, I don't like to call him my mentor because I don't have this official designation of mentor-mentee, but I just kept asking him again. I was very curious, like, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? I'm thinking about starting a company, how do I do it, right? And so he kept telling me to read Eric Ries, read Steve Blank, learn about the lean startup way to do it, throw out your 40-page business plan, and find a technical co-founder. If you want to build a tech company, find a technical co-founder. Do not outsource. So from the very beginning, he drilled that into my head. And so I convinced his best friend, Johnny, to leave IBM to be my co-founder. And
how did you do that?
You know, to be honest, it was really scrappy. I didn't even really know programming at the time. I was like, I didn't even know the difference between front end and back end, you know? And I was like, do you know how to code? Okay, can you build a website? All right, let's partner. I take 50, I think I was like, I take 50-something percent, you take 40-something percent, okay. And that was literally it. And it started out as a side project. So literally we just went home, and after our consulting jobs, we would just work from 8 o'clock to 2 a.m., just researching how to build products and the, you know, UX, what makes a good UX experience. And then I went on Elance to get a designer from Pakistan. I ended up paying him 600 USD to design my whole 4 pages of my website. And then in, I think, 2 or 3 months, part-time, 8 to 2 a.m. every single day, we managed to launch a prototype. And it was just that. So I told Johnny, hey, you're bored at your job, right? I'm bored at my job. We hate our consulting jobs because it was in like finance and all that. It sucked. If we can just make a successful product and slap ads on it and make 70K a year each, let's just quit our jobs and run this. So it was more like a lifestyle business. We didn't understand building a scalable, high-growth company that's VC fundable. Just at the time, I didn't know anything, right? So it started as a project. Yeah.
You actually answered that, but I found it really interesting how you started with this city pockets, which is basically what she just described, and why that business model? So, and why not whatever? I read you're interested in fashion and gastronomy, and I thought, okay, why did she start City Pockets?
No,
So-
actually, there is a story. Before that idea, I actually had a virtual fashion closet idea. Because I
Okay.
was like, in New York, your closets are so small and you need to be fashionable, so you keep recycling your clothes. So I wanted to create a virtual catalog of all the clothes you have so that if you want to sell it or rent it, you can do that. But then I think operationally, it was very challenging. I think we did a lot of user interviews and invited people to take photos of their wardrobe, and nobody took photos of their wardrobe because it was just too intense. So that was my first lesson in a way. It sounded like a cool idea because, you know, in a way I actually rewind a little bit. When I was asking my mentor, hey, what kind of company should I build? And he kept asking me to think about the 3 things that I'm really passionate about. What are the 3 things I'm really passionate about, right? So I was like, okay, food, like dining, I was a huge foodie. I was a restaurant critique at the time, part-time. Fashion and travel, right? So I was trying to think hard of what I can do there. So the fashion closet idea came from that passion in fashion, I guess. But then I got my first taste in doing customer development, where people just didn't act the way that I assumed they would, right? When I actually asked them, hey, would you like to catalog your entire wardrobe? Everyone will tell you, yes, it's a great idea. But when you ask them to actually do it, hey, why don't you go home and take photos of every piece of clothing in your wardrobe? They will not do it. Then I realized that, yeah, like, you know, all your ideas are just assumptions. Until you go out there and ask people to actually do it, it's not, you know, it might not actually work.
Exactly. This customer development, had you already read Steve Blank by that time when you were doing this virtual wardrobe, or where did you learn this concept from?
Yeah, so I hadn't learned it yet. This is when I came up with literally a 40-page business plan for this virtual fashion closet idea. Then I sent it to Ray and like, hey, I'm trying to enter the accelerator that you just went through. That's where he got his VC funding initially, right?
Okay.
And he basically threw it out. He's like, throw it out. Like, you need to read Steve Blank. And he sent me Steve Blank's website, book as well, the link to the book, and Eric Ries. And at the time, my gut feeling just told me that, okay, I'm just going to buy the book right away, right? And after reading, I literally just read 3 chapters of Steve Blank's 4 Steps to Epiphany. And I closed the book and I was like, I had my epiphany. And I was like, oh, I've been doing it the wrong way. And so I scraped the whole 40-page and I scraped the whole idea. It made me realize that I was so stupid in thinking all these assumptions were true. And it just became clear to me that I had so many features. And this is a trait of a lot of entrepreneurs that, you know, instead of thinking about whether or not you're building the, there's this concept, right? Are you building the right product? Or are you building the product right? So I think we care too much about whether we're building the product right, but we don't care enough about whether we're building the right product, right? So it's kind of like we're thinking too much about features, like how can we add a good user experience? How can we add more tools and resources? But then maybe people don't even have that problem in the first place. You're solving the wrong problem in the first place. So you need to zoom out, step out of your nitty-gritty details and really think about the larger picture. Is this problem big enough for the world? And so that made me realize that, you know, I'm thinking too much details, stepped out, and that's when I thought about this next idea, which is City Pockets.
City Pockets.
That was very simple. All we wanted to do is organize people's vouchers and keep track of it so that they don't forget to use it, right? Because if your vouchers expired, that is money gone. You cannot get it back anymore. So we felt that Groupon and Gang was inventing this new form of currency, and this currency should be managed by City Pockets, and eventually would expand to coupons, gift cards, everything.
That's powerful. The point is that the coupons lost a little bit of their strength, but it's really a new currency if you think of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in Malaysia, surprisingly, there's still a lot of people using it. My mom is a huge user.
Okay.
So she has lots of virtual currency in her pocket.
So I'm just taking notes of what you're saying. I really like the building the right product or building the product right. Very simple way of talking about, because many people start with, the most common thing is that you start with that I have an idea, right? And then you want to force your idea down the throats of customers. But I also heard you saying before in one of the meetings we had, maybe, lean startup is quite in fashion. These are
To be honest,
Yeah.
lean in the US is like yesterday's story.
it's so 2010.
It's a little old, but I think we are still new to it here, so it's still good. I think that people are learning these concepts, but it only works for certain kinds of products.
Exactly. I want to ask you exactly that question, but at the same time, how do I identify if you should implement a methodology or not? Because you can become an academic of startups as well and just do things right instead of doing like the product that people want. How do you actually read through the methodologies and identify if it's going to work or not for you and not become an academic of lean startup?
No, it's never about us. It's really just a framework, right? And to put it in a very consulting speak, the most important thing to understand about lean is that really a startup is an experiment, right? You're running a ton of experiments to test your assumptions, right? And if your assumptions are not correct, then you need to modify. You need to iterate on your product, and to stay nimble. I think a lot of people, like you said, they put a lot of weight on their ideas, but they don't share it, right? And when I first started, I was encouraged to share my idea with as many people as possible because it's additive. Whenever you tell someone your idea, they will either get inspired by it or they'll tell you there's a similar problem. They'll tell you that, hey, I saw someone else building the same product, you should look into it. Or there's so much that you can gain from sharing your idea. And sometimes when you share your ideas, you're also verbalizing it. So when you verbalize it, you put more questions into your head about why you're building it and how you're building it. And as you verbalize it more, it also helps you refine your own business model. So it's actually very helpful to do that.
Just share what's your idea.
Yeah, and then maybe like in a month you realize that the idea is dumb and then you're just gonna leave it. Or you realize the idea is really good because everyone is excited about it. That's validation.
Like, don't be afraid of finding out that you have an ugly baby.
An ugly baby.
An ugly baby.
Correct.
So why did you pivot? If everything in my mind seems to be awesome about City Pockets, and suddenly, why did you start Reclip.it?
It was really, really hard actually. So there was another crazy story about how I raised my first round that I told some of my team members. That I don't know, maybe I'll tell it another day about how I actually raised my first round.
Now you created the suspense. Should you tell us the story?
But this is not going to answer your question. So this is a story about hustling, I guess. And so I ended up getting into this accelerator in North Carolina, which was a bad place because there was just no VCs there, no angels. So after the accelerator, we just couldn't raise any money. We went back to New York, right? And we were running out of money. And I was just so broke that I moved into my friend's living room because I was trying to save money. I put my really big one-bedroom apartment, in Manhattan. It was very expensive. I rented it out to someone else, and I paid $500 for a futon in my friend's living room for 6 months. And I lived there for 6 months. I told myself that I intentionally wanted to be scrappy because I wanted to be in that mindset of a scrappy entrepreneur. Even though I actually could afford my one-bedroom apartment, I didn't want to do it. I hid all my designer bags and my clothes. I really wanted to embody this scrappy entrepreneur kind of that hustle, right? And so I was okay with it. And my roommate even brought me to Home Depot to buy curtains to Velcro it up the ceiling to give me some privacy, and it was hanging halfway, and then we had to arrange the chairs to like fill it up. So it was kind of like when you're a little kid, you build forts with cushions and blankets. That was kind of how I was living for 5-6 months. And then I was like, shit, I'm running out of money, like I'm gonna die, right? My co-founder is not really willing to cut into his savings, so he said, Cheryl, by March, if you don't raise any money, we're gonna have to shut this down. So I told him, give me until April, please give me until April. Or no, I said, give me until March. Yeah. So, and then at the time, South by Southwest was happening in March. So South by Southwest is basically this annual conference in Austin, Texas, where all the entrepreneurs from East Coast, West Coast, around the country, and all the VCs go. It's like a giant spring break party for everyone. It's a big conference, but the key are the side parties and the side conferences, right? So my friend told me, Cheryl, as the last leg, you have to go. And then I was talking to another friend, Dave Lifson, who told me that he raised his first 100K at South by Southwest. This is how he did it, the hustle. So I was like, wow, does that really happen, right? So I was like, okay, but I have no money to go. So what happened was, I think a series of events happened. Like I was in a cab to a dinner, like an entrepreneur dinner, and there was a lot of these happening in New York, which is kind of cool. And you just meet new people, other entrepreneurs. And this lady I jumped into the cab to dinner with heard my scrappy story of living in the futon, sleeping on a futon, and I told her I'm thinking about going to South by Southwest. And she happened to work for Razorfish, and she told me, I'll sponsor your batch. It was $800 or $600. So she sponsored my batch. And then, okay, fine. How do I get my flight tickets, right? And then I finally put my living room, my futon, onto Airbnb. And surprisingly, someone booked it for $40 a night for like 10 nights. So I got $400. Someone booked my living room futon for $40 a night. It was amazing. So I used that $400 to buy my flight tickets. And then I'm like, oh shoot, how do I pay for my living there, right? So anyway, then I went to the airport, and I was working so hard on my computer, and they called for my last call for the gate, and I forgot that I was in a connection flight to Texas in, I think, Charlotte, yeah. And then they say, last call, Yeoh Mei Yin, that's my Chinese name. And then I closed my laptop, ran there, they closed the gate. And so I kind of, I was panicking because this is my one ticket to South by Southwest. So I pushed the door, ran on the tarmac to wave at the pilot, don't leave without me. And then the alarm immediately rang, and oh my gosh, the TSA security came, the cops came, they were like, what are you trying to do? And I was told,
oh my God.
Sorry, you have to sleep here overnight. The next plane doesn't leave till next morning, and we have to take your statements. So I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? So anyway, they knew I was innocent and all that. They let me go, but I had to sleep at the airport. I was stuck in Charlotte, right? So I tweeted out, oh, too bad, I'm gonna sleep on the conveyor belt tonight. And then this lady who I was actually calling my friend and telling him the whole story, and I'm like, oh shit. So she came up to me and she's like, my daughter is like your age and she looks just like you, and she's this white lady from the Midwest, and her daughter does not look like me, right? But she was like, I heard your story and you're like a bootstrapping entrepreneur. Oh, I'm so proud of you. You cannot sleep on the conveyor belt. Here, take $100. Go to the hotel room. And she just forced me to take her was such a kind lady, right? So I just didn't want to take her money, but she made me do it. So I took her money, and I was like making my way to the hotel because she wouldn't leave until I went. I was thinking, I'm gonna keep the money, and I took her. Oh my God! No. But I took her business card because I was gonna repay her kindness. She just wouldn't leave, right? And but I just didn't believe in paying for hotels. I was just gonna sleep in the airport anyway. But I just had to walk away to make her happy. And then I got this email that someone booked a Holiday Inn at the airport for me. This random stranger, right?
Okay.
I think he saw me tweet, or he or she or whatever. And so it was weird. So I went to the hotel, and I had to make the receptionist follow me to the room to make sure that there was no one stalking me. It was really weird, but it was fine. And it was just all these angels helped me get to South by Southwest. And I ended up using the $100 to pay for my 1-week stay, crashing on the floor in my friend's room. So I literally went there for free. And sure enough, I pitched some guy, and he gave me a $50K check. Wow. And then I also pitched Dave McClure. I met Dave McClure for the first time there and failed miserably because I was so nervous. It was my first time pitching. I rambled and rambled and rambled, and he was like, oh, okay, here's my number, pitch me another day.
That's awesome. And now you're like BFF.
Now I'm BFFs with him.
That's crazy.
Long time coming. And
it's
then
actually,
I met,
yeah. It's a very small thing, but no one imagines Cheryl fading in a pitch right now. So that's very nice that we imagine her trembling and Preaching
I
someone.
was so junior. I was so raw and green. And it was so obvious. And then, yeah, so then I finally met the entrepreneurs who eventually introduced me to their VCs, who eventually became my lead investors in New York when I went back. So when I went back in April, I met them 2 weeks after South by Southwest. It was like a dream. I was in this room, and he saw my company, and I had like this up to the right chart. I only had like maybe 5,000 users at a time, from like a few hundred like in a few months. So to them, I mean, it was kind of a proof point. Now I think the benchmark is way, way higher. Now to get like a $1 million check, you need like 100K users if you're building consumer product. But back then, 5,000 users was a lot organically. We didn't spend a single cent marketing. So in that room, he just literally said, okay, I'll give you a term sheet tomorrow, and I'll invest 500K into your company. So the next day, sure enough, we got a term sheet. Everything looked fine. And by May, we got $500,000 in the bank. And after that, we raised another, like, I think 400K, so almost 1 million USD from the community.
Wow. That's from going to one event.
Yeah, so what that taught me was that, you know how they say, oh, you're lucky, you're lucky, you're lucky. Again, reading outliers, you're not lucky. The harder you work, the luckier you get, right? So in a way, if you put yourself out there, you are making it more, the chances of you meeting the right people out there, right? And if you just stay at home, or you don't tell anyone about your idea, and you're just working by yourself on your own thing, then things like that will never happen, right? So this is the kind of stuff that I think needs to happen more in Malaysia. There needs to be more serendipity. There needs to be a bit more, you have to put yourself out there, and you never know what will happen.
Wow, yeah. It's logical physics, right? If you create more friction, you've got to create more reaction. But if you don't have enough events, if you don't come to these events, you can't expect serendipity to happen.
Yeah. But I think coming is not enough, right? You need to talk about it. You need to evangelize your ideas and your passion. You need to tell your story. I think this is the one thing that really helped me succeed in life. And a lot of people here, especially in Asia, are very shy. They don't want to share about their personal stuff. But I tell you, a lot of my successes have been people wanted to help me because they are maybe inspired by my story, or they just want to help me succeed. Again, what Malcolm wrote in the book is that sometimes you need the whole village to help you succeed, right? Like people, you cannot get there by yourself. People have to want to help you get there, and there has to be this sense of community around you, and you have to surround yourself with good people who want to see you succeed.
I was actually going to ask you about that. Just give us a hint on how you establish connections. Just now, in this very funny story, we can sense a bit of how you operate when meeting new people. But I sense like you became a mentor on many startups. You've got some articles published on VentureBeat, on big media, and I see like you're a person who attracts and impacts a lot just on how you move around your network. And it would be great to learn a little bit on how do you connect to people from the moment you just meet someone. What do you think you do differently to connect to people?
I'm just really authentic, and you need to just be yourself. You cannot pretend to be someone else, right? Okay, so for example, I'm really good friends with Andrew Chen. He has this very famous blog. He's a growth hacker. He was the one who made the term growth hacking, which was coined by Sean Ellis, popular again through his blog post. He wrote this blog post that's like something like the new MVP of marketing is growth hacker or something like that, right? And that became viral, literally. And I was sleeping on his couch. I was crashing on his couch at the time when he wrote the blog post, when I was interviewing for YC at the time. And everyone was like curious, how did I become good friends with Andrew Chen? And that relationship actually started by Twitter. You know, and this is when I really learned the power of Twitter. And you just have to follow the right people that you really respect and want to connect with. And sometimes you just post interesting tweets, and then you respond to them, and you have a very intelligent conversation with them. And so one day I was out visiting the Bay Area, because building my company in New York, I realized I needed to have that constant connection with the West Coast And I knew I wanted to raise my next round from the West Coast. So I began strategizing, how am I going to build those connections to surround myself with really people that I really respect in that community. So I tweeted, I've been having this one-month relationship with Andrew Chen on Twitter, just kind of back and forth. And then I'm like, hey, Andrew, I'm going to come to the Bay Area. I know you're a mentor at 500 Startups. I've never been there. Can I just drop by to check it out? And he's like, sure, come by. And so from that one coffee meeting at 500 Startups, we became friends. And I told him that, hey, I just closed my round of funding. I'm thinking about starting a blog. And he was such a prolific blogger. Would you mind proofreading my first blog post? And he's like, sure, send it to me. And from then, we just built a relationship. This is another thing that I kind of wanted to share. So at the time, I was a female founder in a very male-dominated world, right? And I wasn't particularly techie. I mean, I know some front-end coding, but to me, it was always like, how do I compete with the big guys, right? With more funding, with the Googles and Facebooks of the world, how do I compete for talent, right? And it's a very common problem here in Malaysia as well. So I went up to the founders of AngelPad. Again, I met Thomas Court through South by Southwest. I made so many connections through South by Southwest. Even my CTO at MaGIC, Kevin Bluer, I met through South by Southwest. So I went to Thomas, hey, I'm a female founder. How do you think I can hire good people? How do I compete? And he's like, Cheryl, go back to New York, buy the domain CherylYeoh.com and blog and tell people your story. Just tell people all the stories you told me about your scrappy ways and blah, blah, blah. Just publish that. And so that people know who you are. Because when you are a small startup, the only thing that you can convince people on is your story, your journey, and how you've grown as an entrepreneur. And you need to inspire people, right? And write interesting articles and have interesting thoughts. And so he said, build your brand, basically, so that when you're hiring people, they want to work for you, they want to learn from you, and they want to be a future entrepreneur. And that is your competitive advantage, right? And so that's where I tried to start a blog and ask Andrew Chen for advice. And so this is kind of how it all, got put together.
I really get inspired by what you're saying, because one of the values we have in here is actually making friends, not contacts. And the reason why is when you connect to people, thinking on like essentially connecting to them and seeing like what you can add to each other as a value, genuinely, it comes out as you reach out to very high levels of connections, because you're not necessarily thinking that you're talking to Dave McClure, managing founder of 500 startups. You're talking to him as who he is.
Right. So this is saying you always, when you meet a mentor, never ask him, can you be my mentor, right? And you don't ask him for something first. You need to give him something first. You need to show value, or you need to show that you're trying to build a relationship, not because you want something from them, right? Because in this world, anytime someone asks you for something, I mean, it's sort of like, it has to be a two-way relationship, right? So that's how you build relationships.
Awesome. So I actually have a ton of more questions, but we are really running out of time. I'm really going to ask one last one that jumps way fast forward in your journey, because it got to be my last question, because we already run 15 minutes talking. I couldn't see it happening. And I want to give it to the floor. So this is my last question. You guys can start thinking of what you want to ask Cheryl. We have space for like 5 questions, or maybe more if you want to ask. So you came to Malaysia. Many people here might ask, why did you come back? If they want to ask it, I will give it up to them. I would just ask you, like, you came back here, you're the person who have talked to the biggest number of entrepreneurs lately in Malaysia that I know. So what is your biggest recommendation as an overall conclusion to Malaysian entrepreneurs? What do you think they should focus on? What do you think they should learn or develop in order to succeed and not become Silicon Valley, but become a highly successful Malaysian entrepreneurial ecosystem?
So I think a lot of, I mean, I guess I spoke through some of that, like in terms of not sharing ideas and whatnot. One of the common ones is people here tend to think too locally. They don't do their market sizing as well as they should, because in Southeast Asia, there's 600 million people, so they need to think beyond Malaysia and grow bigger, right? But the other point to, I think a lot of people are trying to copy business ideas from the West that has worked, which is fine. I think some models, maybe e-commerce driven works, but I would actually urge people to look into what are the models that can work in Malaysia and Southeast Asia, right? And what is unique about where you are here in this country that you can leverage. And also think about your expertise, right? Like I mentioned, if you're trying to build a product that solves a solution that you're not even a user of, it's very hard to understand why you're building it. And when things go wrong, you might just give up. Like if you're a guy and you're building a product for moms, and you've not experienced that, then it might be really tough. But if, say, you've worked in oil and gas, maybe you were a consultant in oil and gas, and you realize there's a lot of inefficiencies in that industry, then come out and build a product to solve that industry, because oil and gas, to be fair, is a huge resource in Malaysia. Palm oil, I don't know, halal products, right, which is a huge untapped market. Look at those opportunities and what makes Malaysia unique, and then you can truly capture market share. Otherwise, if you try to be another social network and whatnot, I don't think these are the kinds of businesses that would be successful. You know?
One last question. You can answer that or not, it's just a random question for me, but if you would start a business yourself in Malaysia, not for Malaysia, for the region or for the world, but from Malaysia, what business would you start? What opportunities would you tap in?
I thought about this a while back. I don't know if it's valid anymore, but I was thinking about how Asians or Malaysians love to look at their, I mean, I guess anyone does like to look at their phones, like to check social media. So I was thinking your home screen of your phone is very valuable, and Android is also very widely used platform in emerging countries, that you can sell that homepage screen. You can create beautiful ads, and every time someone unlocks the ad, you charge 10 cents or whatever it is, that CPM. So I thought that model could work very well here.
Interesting. Is anyone doing that?
In Korea, I think some companies are doing it very well.
Okay.
And in the US, no one has, I think I'm seeing a few models, but it's something that is not, there's no clear winner. I think people are dabbling into it. And I thought that could be a very interesting model for Malaysia.
Interesting. Okay, thank you very much. I swear I have questions about funding. Maybe let's have her on another startup grind. Just for now, for the moment, a big round of applause for her. And I hope you guys ask the questions I want to ask. Right, so we have a mic on the back. So who wants to ask a question? Can you just
Hi, good evening, Cheryl. Before I came here, I was told that you were awesome. I've changed my mind. I think you're awesomely awesome. One more round of applause for Cheryl.
Thank you.
You will say you're authentic, and I can confirm to that. I can confirm you're authentic because each and every experience that you related to us, I think all of us learned tons from you. I've got one question for you, because you may be having the next Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg's in town here. All right. So all of us came here to learn from you, and also to see how we can. Yeah. Now my question is, how do we? All entrepreneurs here go for the MaGIC funding that there is. Yeah. Okay. All right. Some of us may have prototypes and whatnot. So
funding. Yeah. Well, we don't offer any grants now. We may offer grants next year. We're thinking about an ASEAN accelerator. So the only way we'll probably offer grants is through a program, because I believe in building communities through cohorts. I think, again, we're very early in that stage of planning, so nothing has been out yet.
Okay. So guys, just again, if you have a startup, you can approach Cheryl later on. It was not your case. And pitch her. Now, questions. There at the back. I'm gonna get fit.
I'm here as an entrepreneur, not MaGIC CEO.
Hi, Cheryl. I was just curious. So, coming from an American market and then coming here, I've heard that there's a lot of issues, for example, with gaining traction with app usage here, and I think it's still very decentralized. With MaGIC, it's becoming better. But in terms of kind of like getting people here excited about using apps, or kind of like a lot of people use apps on their phones, but I think they're not so enthused about maybe locally made apps. What is your opinion on that, and how do you maybe think like the best way to get people excited about that is?
Yeah, so I think this is in a way a psychology question, right? So what I'm really surprised is how much people do business on Facebook. Right? Like, to me, that's really encouraging. So I know some of you have messaged me on Facebook on a business basis, and it's so awkward to me. So I would urge to look into that, right? If people are on social media so much and they're on Facebook all the time, my mom is literally on Facebook all the time, and I'm noticing that behavior, which is not usual in the US. There's a ton more other apps, and I totally agree with you. That's one of the problems. They're very much in social media, but not other utility apps is what I call them, right? So how can you maybe promote your utility app through Facebook? I talked to a lot of people at Facebook, and they're actually trying to figure out how to encourage that marketplace, the apps marketplace, to be more utility driven, right? Because now it's very games centric. So use that as a way to encourage people to find out about your app and push them. I think when I'm building products, right, I always talk about psychology, which is why I think when I hire product managers or UX people, I always like when they come from a psychology background or human interaction background, because they study why people do certain things. At the end of the day, it comes from motivation, right? What would make people change their behavior? So as you think about building your product, in a day when you do your customer development, think about how the user goes about their day. And when you're building that app, when would they pull out their phone and use that app? Or how can you insert your app in a way that is in the flow with, or how can you transition very smoothly from one platform that you use all the time into an app that you can separate. It takes time. In a new market like this, it takes time. But I see it's a good opportunity, especially for Malaysians, because we're so social media heavy driven. How can you think about leveraging Facebook to ease them into a new utility app?
Hi, I've been reading your blog a lot, and I'm very interested in how you transition from, someone from a strong finance management consulting background to go into startup. So probably two questions. I know you say you're not here in the capacity of MaGIC CEO, but I think it was Paul Graham that said the reason why there's so many successful startups in the Valley is because there are so many examples of successful startups in the industry that is just booming. Malaysia is very nascent at this stage, so how do you think all the different people, different stakeholders in Malaysia can build more examples of long-term sustaining value-adding startups? That's my first question. Second one's probably more personal. Coming from a finance background myself, where do you start? What do you do? I know you gave a lot of examples, but what's your personal advice for someone who's wanting to take the plunge?
Sure. So the first question, Silicon Valley didn't start mushrooming with examples, shiny examples, right? It has a very long history, and it came from government backing, from military products, R&D, from the universities anyway. So it's arguably government funding is essential and important in any ecosystem. How you build it is a different story, right? And the point I'm trying to make is more that Silicon Valley is what it is today because of the critical mass of just really smart people being there around Stanford and them leaving to solve problems in the world, right? And I can argue that New York, because I've been there and I saw how it transformed itself from a financial hub into a tech hub in just 3 short years. And now they're the second most vibrant hub in the country. And it was because there was a critical mass of people doing startups together, and there was a huge difference before a co-working space and after a co-working space. And when I talk about co-working spaces, which is why I'm really passionate about this, it's not about the space, it's not about the rental model, it's about the community, right? So when we talk about Malaysia, and I'm trying to see how that will work here, do we have a critical mass of startups? You can argue that we have a lot of startups, but they're all scattered all around and nobody knows where they are because you're working at home, you're working in some office somewhere, and you're just everywhere. How can we create that density? Because if you don't create a visible density, you can't have that random interaction happen, right? Oh, I know this VC, I introduced you to him. And you cannot have VCs wanting to come here and create funds because they can't see you guys. We are too afraid of experimenting, and we're too afraid of making decisions because we think that decisions are permanent, right? When I gave my TEDxKL speech last year, I talked a lot about this, about how if you view decisions in life as experiments, then it's not hard to make, because if you don't like it, you know what, just go back into your consulting, your finance. Maybe 5 years ago, they would say, oh, you failed, I will not hire you. But today, I believe it's changed. It has changed. If you went out, tried to found a company, and you went back to your boss for a job, I'm pretty sure he'll give you the job again. So there isn't that much to lose. And if you don't try it now, when will you ever try it, right? So there's no right time to start a company. The right time is now.
Anyone else?
First of all, thank you. And so my question is actually very simple. That is, funding is one of the biggest problem for startups. Like everyone's on funding, first of all. So, but it is also very difficult. So maybe I think 5%, 10% people can get funding. 90% startups just drop down because there's not funding. So there is a few way that people can raise their funding, Kickstarter or something like that. But those things are actually product based. Like, yeah, I have a prototype, I can actually get funding for my product. It's more like selling. So, but we can pretty much do more than with this concept. But one thing is that we don't need 1 million from one company to do funding. But if 1,000 people, everyone's spent only 1,000 each, there is 1 million ringgit, which is enough to do pretty much very big things. So, but the problem is management. Like, if you want 1,000 people as a co-founder, not as a consumer, then it will be very good, bad management. Like, it's very difficult to manage. But the good point is that if we can manage 1,000 people to do some things, we can be self-consumer as well. Like you mentioned, the palm farm or something. Everyone use palm oil maybe. Let's say everyone eat fish, right? If 1,000 people raise a fund, let's 1 million, and you spend on a very not so much techy things, less normal fish farm or something. So at the end, every 1,000 can consume this. But when you buy something like that from other businessmen, they are taking 30% profit from us. So if we can start up like that, we don't need to give them 30%. We can save that money, and we can actually sell those products to other people as well. So,
sorry, I don't really get the question.
my question is that, let's say if you want to make a company like that, any startup funds, how can I manage, how can you make a startup like 1,000 people together as a co-founder? Something like that. You got it?
And maybe take on your question and build another one that we're just talking about. Is basically like, you raised 840K in funding for Reclip.it. So why don't you just share with us, like, what's your experience on how much should you give in as equity? How much should you protect your startup? What are your recommendations towards raising funding versus like dividing, splitting your equity into like 10% according to the funding you get? So,
well, yeah. So the benchmark in the US might be vastly different from here, and I've heard really horrendous numbers being taken away from founders here by investors. But as a general rule of thumb, and you can research this, you can Google this, you should never give away 20 to 30% of your company with any round. So the interesting thing is that no matter how much you raise, right, at each point of your life cycle, expect to give away 20 to 30%. So if you have to raise money and you spend the same amount of time raising money, you might as well raise a bigger round, is the advice I'm always given in the US, right? So if you raise 500K, they're gonna take 25% of your company away. If you raise 1.5 million, it's also 25% of your company. That is the way it should be. You might as well raise 1.5 million in a way, right? But that's just in the US. I think here, I think it's still applicable. I don't think you should ever give up more than 30% of your company at any time.
And linking up to the idea of crowdfunding, what do you think about that? Was more into what he was saying. What do you think of crowdfunding as a way to raise funds? When you mentioned 1,000 co-founders, I think you mentioned like, yeah.
Okay. I didn't get your question originally. I mean, crowdfunding is a very new thing. It hasn't even taken off in the US. It might take off here, actually. Malaysia might be one of the leading countries. It's still a bit, I mean, I don't want to say too much, but someone has got to put a valuation on the company. Someone has to set that so it would protect the founders from being too diluted, in my opinion. So it's all about, it comes down to valuation, right? If there's a valuation, then whatever you're giving away, it's like you're selling shares in your company. So you have control over it. Technically, you should have control over your own valuation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, more questions. Give you 5, 4, 3. Yeah, I know that happens. Just come running here.
Hi, I just want to know, I mean, she'll probably ask the question is, what is it from Silicon Valley you probably want to bring here, or is there something you want to start organically here in Malaysia about the culture we have for startups?
Okay, so I want to make it clear that I actually am not trying to emulate Silicon Valley. I'm not trying to bring Silicon Valley here. I don't believe in that. I think every ecosystem is very unique. Like, I actually appreciate that I started my company in New York and saw how it transformed. And then I moved to the Valley and raised more funding there, and I sold my company in the Valley. So it was interesting to see how a new ecosystem was built and how an old mature ecosystem was, right? So if anything, I'm trying to do a lot of the things that New York did for its community, because I see a lot of that here, the same kind of challenges, the same kinds of risk-averse investors, sporadic ecosystem. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, creating a critical mass in a community like you guys who come together is very important to me. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on at MaGIC, what my team is going to be focusing on. Building a lot of platforms to enable you guys to find each other, to interact with each other. And I think we always complain that there's not enough mentors, successful companies in the ecosystem to learn from, right? In fact, there actually is. There's a lot of successful entrepreneurs. Maybe it's just hard to reach them and you don't know who to reach, right? So we're trying to make that visible through a mentorship tool. But again, that's why I mentioned I don't like the term mentorship, because there's no such thing as a mentor-mentee. Who defines you? Who qualifies you as a mentor? All of you are mentors. And what happened in New York when everybody was a first-time founder was that it was really peer mentoring, right? I got together with a bunch of founders. We call it the Founders Breakfast every Thursday morning. And we talk about shit. We talk about challenges. And through that, we help each other out, right? And sometimes there would be a traction mentor where he is 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, and we would all learn from that person. So I think the important takeaway here is that don't think of it as, oh shit, we're in a shithole because we don't have enough successful founders. But you guys, if you guys just all talk amongst yourself, you guys are all smart people. You can help each other out, and that is how a community really grows. Don't expect someone to helicopter in and save you. We can build one here ourselves.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. I like closing with a question that gives us food for thought. So I'm gonna ask her a last question that was actually one I thought I would ask as the first one. But I read somewhere, and it was also the topic of a TED talk that she gave in here, that finding your passion or following your passion is a bad advice.
Yeah.
How do you explain that to inspire us?
I don't want to give you a TEDx talk.
20 minutes more, yeah. So just why following your passion is a bad advice?
I think passion is overrated, right? As Gen Y, everyone is, oh, follow your passion. If you like to draw, oh, be an artist, right? But in real, I'm just being very practical and realistic. You're as passionate as you're successful. The bottom line, right? You can be super passionate, but if you're passionate about singing and you keep singing on the street, but nobody listens to you, are you going to be as passionate anymore? you're gonna think you suck, right, eventually? Because you're not meeting a market need, you're not serving, you're not solving the right problem. So you are a happy, passionate artist when you are actually good and people listen to you. So don't put too much emphasis on passion. At the end of the day, you have to find out what you're good at and because that will make you successful at the end. And then it fuels your passion, right? So I talk a lot about passion that's unsustainable versus sustained passion, where if you keep getting better and better what you do, your passion is sustained because you're successful, right? And you have to spend time honing your skill. They say it takes you 10,000 hours to be an expert at something. So spend that time, once you've identified something that you can be passionate about, invest that time to be really good at it so that your passion sustains and you can achieve success.
Amazing. So basically, make friends, work hard. What else?
Be sustainably passionate.
Be sustainably passionate. And just fucking do it. Sorry for that. Oh my god, we gotta edit in the video. It was perfect until the end.
Just freaking do it. How about that?
Just freaking do it. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Big round of applause to her.
Thank you. Thanks.